I want to first say that I'm a big fan of Quentin Tarantino, and not just his movies, but since in the social media age, getting to watch all the interviews with him, talking about cinema, and talking about film and entertainment in general, and also hearing about it from somebody who is obviously a film historian. I mean, this guy he's like an archive of, he's like a film institute. He is like an American Film Institute, as far as I'm concerned. And just listening to interviews with him is highly entertaining. I think that the Bill Maher interview that he did, I actually sat and listened to that entire interview. I might have only stopped it once or twice to just go take a piss or grab some food or something. It was great. And I'm always learning, listening to him. I'm just learning about stuff. And also Brian De Palma, who a lot of people disparage, and how much Quentin Tarantino loves Brian De Palma is interesting to me, because I also like, I love The Untouchables. I love Blowout. Those are just great films. Brian De Palma is very good, but I'm not as big of a fan of like Scarface and as other people. But anyway, this is just my taste, right? I have my own strange taste. But so I want to say that first off, that I really enjoy this guy, and he's kind of, and as time has gone on, he's gotten more important, I think, in the entertainment business. Because everything has gotten so boutique and strange in Hollywood, and not that it ever wasn't strange, but it's definitely reached new levels of it. I think when I landed here in the early 2000s, I couldn't have thought, oh, well, this couldn't get any stranger. This is definitely a stranger place with stranger people than it was 20 years ago or 20 plus years ago when I arrived here. It's also interesting to hear the take of somebody who's not only a master knower of cinema, but also somebody who's older than you. And so they have information and they have a perspective that's different from yours. Specifically, they have information that you don't have about films you might have not even seen, because I wasn't old enough to know, movies that were not, maybe didn't get circulated. They might even have big stars in them, but didn't get as circulated in the 1970s, so that a child like me of the 1980s wouldn't have known or heard of them. And so Quentin Tarantino is constantly on record talking about stuff that is, and directing me to see stuff that's really, really good, really interesting most of the time. The comical things about Quentin Tarantino, and again, this is all just subjective, totally. It's my opinion. Quentin Tarantino has his opinion about shit. I have my opinion about shit, and we have different perspectives because we're from different times too. I enjoyed the 80s. I like the 80s. Quentin Tarantino really hated the 80s. Really just disliked the 80s. And one of the interviews that I saw him do, where he talked about, the 80s was like the worst time for cinema. It was just terrible. And he goes through and cites all his examples. And then he goes, and in the 90s, we revived it. In the 90s, it was all better again. And which is hilarious to me, because, first of all, the 90s were better specifically for Quentin Tarantino. That's who the 90s were better for. For those of us who had to live through the 90s, the 90s were, as much as they were Quentin Tarantino, they were also equal parts Oprah fucking Winfrey, Walt Disney World, Chicken Soup for the fucking Soul, Beverly Hills 90210. Oh, God. Primetime soap operas like It's Beverly Hills 90210 and Melrose Place, Titanic, and I don't know if there's other things that I'm forgetting and not thinking of. So as much as they were Def Comedy Jam and Quentin Tarantino, which those were very cool things, they were also, there were, for every one of those cool things, there were 7 or 8 really fucking cheeseball things. Boy bands. That was something that, again, that happened in the 90s. It was one boy band after another. So there, and also the whole craze of daytime television, nighttime soap operas, daytime television, reality television, and primetime, like major primetime game shows. Like the whole pageant culture, all of that fucking primetime game show shit. That might have been the 2000s. I don't know. It might not have been the 90s. The point is it was really bad. We're just fucking awful. So I think when he's disparaging the 80s and then talking about the 90s, we resurrected everything in the 90s. You resurrected everything for you, motherfucker. You made things better for you, and it's a sobering thing because I make what I make for me. I don't know how the fuck it's going to affect society if it becomes something that if it hits critical mass. I mean, I haven't even given that any consideration. I'm just doing what I feel I need to do. And yeah, I mean, it could be very bad for society. I hope it's not, but it could be. But hopefully what I do is good, and then whatever chaff is, I'm the wheat that's separated from whatever chaff that tries to imitate what I'm doing. Oh, yeah. So there was one other thing. The other hilarious thing that is applied, deals something with the 80s, is the funny thing about Tarantino when he's really selling this thing about how the Chevy Chase movies are better than the Bill Murray movies. Because the Bill Murray movies have these sort of ridiculous happy endings, and the Chevy Chase movies don't. And it's a fair criticism, because it's true. In a lot of cases, it is true in regards to Bill Murray's movies and Chevy Chase's movies. The difference, though, is that what Bill Murray... Well, look, Quentin Tarantino's giving you his opinion. But what the element that he's not really... Either he's not aware of it, or it doesn't move the needle for him. But for most of us, I think, sort of intuitively, we kind of want... Look at Bill Murray. Take a look at him. Just look at him and listen to him. The guy who, from the south side of Chicago, who had to fight his way out of a lot of places, and probably got in a lot of fights. And then look at Chevy Chase. Look at this dimple-chinned motherfucker who looks like he had, wears penny loafers with no socks, and went to some fucking Exeter preparatory school. Maybe he didn't, but he looks like a guy who did. And he sounds and walks and talks like a guy who did. There's no chip on the shoulder of like a Chevy Chase. There's like a chip on the shoulder of a Bill Murray. And I think most of us relate to Bill Murray more than we relate to a Chevy Chase. At least my generation did. I love Chevy Chase, but I kind of, when I watch Bill Murray, I want to see him win. I want to watch a guy like that win. I'm from Chicago, and I know Bill Murray's a proud Chicago guy, and I like watching this tough guy who looks like he got in fights and has scars and doesn't have was probably losing his hair by the time he was 25. I want to watch that guy win. I don't give a shit about fucking Chevy Chase. If Chevy Chase doesn't win in the end, so be it. And I think that's something maybe Quentin Tarantino, an aesthetic sort of that Quentin Tarantino is not taking into consideration when he's rolling out his whole thing about fucking Bill Murray and Chevy Chase. There's one other funny thing that... So when Quentin... And, there's like, I've heard other people talk about this too. Well, there was no independent film in the 1980s. Look, dude, there were independent films in the 1980s. There were big independent directors who were doing stuff, whether it was with the studios or, they had independent financing. I mean, Robert Altman, Woody Allen, David Lynch, David Cronenberg, the Coen brothers, Spike Lee. I mean, those are just the ones I can think of offhand. There might be more. I think even Steven Soderbergh might have started in the 1980s. And he was the beginning of the quote-unquote independent film movement, supposedly, that was in the 90s. But just the idea that there was no independent film before the 90s was kind of absurd. I think that the term independent film was coined in the 90s. But the 90s was a period of mergers and acquisitions like no other. So really these media companies were merging and acquiring and absorbing one another in the 90s more than anything. So the idea that the 90s were this, like, again, beacon of hope, it just definitely, this guy, Tarantino, is a little fucking delusional. He's a little fucking delusional. He thinks that he's some kind of like messianic figure for he's like, you're not a messianic figure for film, bro. You are a defibrillator on a dying corpse. That's what basically Quentin Tarantino is. Like, the corpse is dead and decomposing, and Quentin Tarantino is like the embalming fluid. You know what I mean? Like, this guy thinking he like parted the sea so we could all walk through on dry land in the 90s. The 90s sucked. Okay, the 90s fucking sucked for all the reasons that I illustrated. Go into like, how great they were. They were great for Quentin fucking Tarantino.